Class will begin like 14 minutes early, my guy. I respect that though. Thank you. We learned print, we learned math, and we learned strings.
Okay.
Something that's it's not really the easiest to code. The easiest to code would probably be Scratch, but it is easy to read compared to other languages. Okay, a low-level language is a computer language that's like closer to machine code, like binary, right? Binary is like the lowest, and as you get higher, it's like you can tell the computer to do less things directly, but instead enter commands into a console that translates it into machine code. It's like more translation occurs as your language becomes higher. Python's like a high-level language, meaning that a lot of translation between human language and machine code is occurring. Right? Syntax, it's a new term. It just means grammar, and it's just the grammar of coding languages. You know what the modulus symbol is, right? Or would you like an
Um,
explanation on that?
yeah, I'd like an explanation.
All right. So essentially, the modulus symbol, what it does is it returns the remainder of the first number, which is here, divided by the second number, right? It returns a remainder as an integer. That's what data type means. And it will always return it as an integer. But the number this would return technically is zero, but it does ask for data type. So the right one would be integer. Floor division. How many times can this first number go wholly into this number go wholly into this number? So essentially one time would be the correct answer, but does ask for a data type. As it does ask for a data type, it will always return an integer. With modulus floor division, they will always return integers, as you cannot have it. The entire point of it is to return an integer. The reason this would throw an error is just because this six value, since it starts at 0 and ends at 5, 6 would go over it and you would get an out of range error. This is perfectly legal. You have something like this, it means if you don't specify a number, Python just automatically assumes from the start. So it would start at S and go to the fourth index, which is 0, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. Be careful on this one, it's a bit tricky. Remember, once again, we can use a comma to separate two values, and that will put the string together in the console.
So this is week 3 of the Basics of Python course. Today we'll be going over Booleans to begin with, and then go into a view of all the basic data types, or just decisions in the program, and finally we'll finish with converting between different data types. First, we'll be going over comparisons in Python. Now, comparisons are basically just like looking at comparing two different values, right? These are generally variables, so you can be comparing two strings, two integers, or really whatever. What do comparisons give you? Whenever you do a comparison, it results in a Boolean value, and these Booleans are basically just true or false values, right? Generally, Booleans will come out in your programs from these comparisons that I previously mentioned, where if you, let's say that this example, like 7 is not divisible by 2, it will set is even to false, and if you print it, you'll see false printed in your console.
So in this example, the variable of is even is just being set to whether or not this number is divisible by 2, right? So since the number isn't, it sets this value to false, and thus when I print it, it prints false. Before each line of code, you're going to press Shift and 3, and you're going to comment out each line of code as such with one of these. Or if it's easier, highlight everything and then press command slash if you're on a Mac, or control slash if you are not on a Mac. Okay, so if we remember, Booleans can either be true or false. However, if you surround them with a parentheses, you turn them into a string, as it will just display the word like true or true in this case. For the person that selected yellow, just remember that a Boolean can either be up, it has to be uppercase. So if it was false, the F would also be uppercase. Careful. There's a number that would be a math integer that's not a Python integer. So if it's surrounded by quotes, it is a string, and 200 would be the correct answer. All right, so this would be an integer. A float needs a period, This is just a word. This is not. Oscar, you're muted.
So basically, what we'll be doing is we'll be going over if statements, which are basically just the way that the program, or in this case Python, makes decisions about whether it should do something or not. The format is pretty simple. You have if, and then in parentheses or not in parentheses, the condition you want, and then a colon. Now, for example, in the example below, if since 5 is not equal to 6, the code will not run after the if statement. So now an example of this in code is this. One very important thing about if statements and how Python tells what's in the if statement and what's outside of the if statement is by you indenting all the lines that the if statement is under. Since print is indented, Python knows that that's what you want to happen if the if statement is evaluated to be true. I'll give you guys a second to copy this into Replit, and then you can also change your comparisons a bit to see how it works.
Excuse me? Do you know how to make that? So in line 10, how do you have it like indented? Because when I try to do that, it won't.
Oh, so you press tab.
Yeah,
Tab?
just press tab.
Yeah.
Okay.
We press tab.
All right. Thank you.
No problem.
Now, to go along with if statements, there's also else statements, which basically execute if the if statement was determined to be false. For example, if you look at the second if statement here, if you put else after it, since the if statement it goes with result didn't run, what's inside of the else statement will run. So in this case, it would print false, the string is not equal to 3. There's also else statements, which are basically else statements where you can declare an additional condition. It's a very similar syntax to where it's elif, the condition, and then a colon. However, the only difference is that it must be followed. If you see this in code, here's a little example. If you set num1 equal to 3 and num2 equal to 2, well, first what the program will do is it'll see if num1 is less than num2. If so, it'll print greater than. In this case, it's not. Then check the elif statement, which is it will check once again if num1 is less than num2. Let's say if this was a different conditional, though, let's say num1 is greater than num2, it will print less than. Both of those are only false, and only if both are false, then it'll print that they're equal. Once again, I encourage you to change values and just get a better understanding of how this works.
So like when everyone's done, also try changing num2 to like the value of 3 and just seeing how that affects the code and like what part executes. Because in this block from lines 22 to 27, only one of these blocks of code, either line 23, 25, or 27 runs. Only one of these will run, not any more, not any less.
So now that everyone has completed it, please go back to the Neopod and we'll continue with the lesson. We'll be moving on to the and or keywords. Now, these basically allow you to test for multiple conditions at once. The syntax of these is you use them in if statements and they basically chain conditions. In this case, you have condition 1 and condition 2. And in this case, it would evaluate to false because 5 is not equal to 6, so this will be false. But 3 is equal to 3, and will only return true if both conditions around it are also true. Works in a similar way, where only one of the conditions needs to be true, but it will also return true. See, the OR syntax is very similar. Again, here is another code example with and or being used. So if you're given 3 numbers, you can check if num1 is smaller than num2 and that num1 is smaller than num3. These are both true. Num1 would be the smallest number, so you can print smallest, and then just change that and to an or. What it's now checking for is that at least one of the numbers is greater than num1. The program will print second smallest, but let's say num1 is bigger than both num2 and num3, it would go to the else statement and print biggest.
And also note that in the code below, you can also add more than one and or. So like if I just added a num4 as well, I could also check it, something like that. And it doesn't matter how many ands or ors you do, but I'm pretty sure if you add an or here, you probably would want to put parentheses around the things you wanted to evaluate first. Otherwise, it may not come out as you expect, as the parentheses do make a difference, and order of operation also does apply here. The difference here would be it would take num1 is less than num2 and this condition. So essentially, it's one of these and this, but if I take the parentheses and put it over here, it would say both of these or this. Those two would have vastly different outcomes. Also, if you're done early and you're just waiting, you could also like change around the values and see what happens.
For this exercise, what you'll be doing is you'll be setting a variable num1 equal to a number. It doesn't really matter what it is right now, it can be anything you want. And then write a program that prints out if that num1 is positive, negative, or 0. You guys want to do this by using if statements and comparisons.
All right. So at this point in time, can everyone just in the chat, but either yes, I need to go over the solutions, or no, I don't want to go over the solutions. All right. Is that the end of the slide, Oscar? And should we move on to Kahoot?
Yeah, I mean, if no one has any questions, we can just move on to Kahoot.
So I do believe that we've seen this one before. Remember, Boolean variable, no parentheses, uppercase letter. All right. If we remember from the comparison slide, the exclamation mark checks if something is, it means not. This equation would mean 5 is not equal to 4. And that would be a proper comparison in Python. However, we have never seen a question mark in that, so this would be the correct answer. So this is the variable, and this, since it has two equal signs, it's saying that this is the value it's assigning to the variable, and this would evaluate to true, which is Boolean. Take your time on this one and just read through it and see which conditions evaluate to true and false and what. Be careful on line 4, it's a bit tricky. And that little piece of code, the reason I said to be a bit careful is when the less than sign, when it doesn't say less than or equal to, technically 60 is not less than 60, but it is equal to 60, but that's not what it's checking. So therefore that one would evaluate to false, and therefore alive would be your correct answer. Yeah, that is today's class. I hope to see you all again next time. Thank you for your time.